At the stroke of midnight, midterm, President William Ruto has made major changes in his administration. In a move that makes the broad-based government broader, the principal secretary list is dominated by new appointees in what looks like a reflection of the handshake with ODM leader Raila Odinga. In the changes, anti-media, former media commentator Edward Kisiangani has, as expected, been shown the door, bringing to an end the most acidic phase in relations between Kenyan media and the Kenyan government. Some others have been moved, some retained, and some, like former Health CS Susan Nakhumicha, have been recalled. We take a deep dive, name by name and line by line, in a broad-based analysis of the changes in government. Later on, we head to Meru, where a concerted effort of an all-male political brigade finally paid off, as Governor Kawira Mwangaza is kicked out after many attempts. So what tilted the odds? It's a deep dive into the inner workings of Meru politics. In our final words, Bonyo's bone picks a bone with the church for failing to choose between the path to the left and the path to the right. Sam Sense finds no sense in the purported dropping of mathematics as a compulsory subject. Jamila's memo is addressed to political leaders of all levels. When exactly do they listen? Kai Kai's kicker is a heartwarming send-off for enemy of the press, Professor Edward Kisiangani. And on my take, I revisit the disappearance of Nakuru fisherman Brian Odhiambo and why this is not a photo opportunity. The gang is here.
Kuna wengine ambao wanaambia sisi tumeduingia pande nyingine, hiyo ni mzuri, lakini nasema bwana, jana wewe ulikuwa unasema sisi ni nyang'au. Leo wewe unasema sisi sasa leo tumekuwa malaika. Tumebadilika, tumekuwa kutoka nyang'au tulikuwa malaika namna gani? Kwa hivyo sisi wenyewe hatuwezi kudanganywa. Tunajua pale tunataka kwenda. Naambia watu wetu wasimame imara. Nina hakika tutafika. Lakini hatutaki unafiki ya mtu ambaye anasema hapo mimi tumeweka mtego. Mtego. Waswahili husema mtego wa panya ushika waliomo na siokuwemo.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program tonight. The hashtag is NewsGang at Citizen TV Kenya. And that statement by Raila Odinga actually came hours before the announcements that were made just earlier this evening on the changes in government. And there have been quite some changes. The first since the formal signing, but certainly not the first of this new broad-based government. And we will get to, you know, how many those have been, because it would seem our heads are spinning. Let me just say on the outset, we used to have a subject in high school, or was it primary, history and civics.
GHC.
Yes, GHC.
History and
yes.
civics, yeah.
And in civics, you know, we used to learn, who is the Minister for Education? It was Peter Olo Aringo.
Yeah.
You know, who is the PC for Rift Valley? You knew it because...
Mohammed Yusuf.
There you go. Yeah. Because things remained...
Some can't relate.
Sorry?
Some can't relate.
Please I'm so sorry, Sam.
Sorry. Sorry.
This is a history lesson.
Protection for you. Please carry on.
Thank you. I hope you're taking notes. But it was so predictable then that this was a subject and we would study it and it was examinable, you know, term after term, year after year. Who can say the same lately, particularly over the last 2.5 years? My word. So let's begin with the latest of the latest changes in government. And it seems that there's been quite a bit of movement. But before we get there, there's been some new things besides who's where. We now have new state departments. You're the numbers guy. How many are they, and what does that mean, Sam?
Yeah, from the list shared by the Executive Office of the President, it shows that there are 7 new state departments, and you cannot tell whether this is it because you remember initially we were talking about some 51 state departments when 51 principal secretaries were nominated and eventually appointed, but there's a department that was left vacant after PS Veronica Nduva moved to the EAC as Secretary General. That department has never had a replacement of the principal secretary, so we don't know whether it's still part of the consideration. But so the 7 state departments, if you're to ignore former Nduva Muli's department, you would then have 50. Plus 7, you're now at 57. So we're talking about, there's a new state department called Public Investments and Assets Management to be based at the National Treasury. The Cabinet Secretary would be John Mbadi, and the new PS is Cyril Wagunda. Then you have a new state department called National Government Coordination under the Office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary. So previously, the Office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary did not have this department. It was just about, there was a question of performance, but there was also the question of parliamentary affairs. Yeah. So the person named to that department is Ahmed Abdisalan Ibrahim. There's another new state department. We've not heard this before. Justice, Human Rights and Constitutional Affairs to be based at the Office of the Attorney General and the Department of Justice. And the person named to that department is Judith Pareno. So it's sort of, she's going to establish a new department. We'll see how that goes. Another one is Science, Research and Innovation under the Ministry of Education. You recall that previously, up until today, the Ministry of Education had about 3 state departments. So you have the basic education, there's the higher education, and then there was the TVET the department. Now you have an extra one where Professor Abdul Razak Shaukat will be moving to.
So it'll now have 4 state departments in the Ministry of Education?
It looks like, unless further changes come.
Oh, for now, okay.
Yes.
Good rider, yes.
There's another one, a new state department called Aviation and Aerospace Development. So this will be based at the Ministry of Transport. Previously it was Transport and Roads or something like that. Yes. So transport was taking care of every aspect, including the aerospace itself. Yeah. But now we'll see how this pans out. So the new person named to that is Teresia Mbaika, who previously was at the Devolution Ministry. Or the department under the Office of the Deputy President. Then there's a new state department called Special Programs to be based at the Ministry of Public Service, Human Capital Development and Special Programs. So previously the special programs I think were being executed by the Principal Secretary Kelo Harsama, who is currently at the Ministry of Regional Affairs as well as ASOLS. So it's
under EAC Ministry.
Yes,
right?
yes. It is now created as a department and to move under the Ministry of Public Service. The other one is the State Department for Children Welfare, and it will be based at the Ministry of Labour and Social Protection. So the PS for that will be a new PS, CPA Karen Agengo Achieng. So those are the 7 new state departments that are coming on board. That would take it to about 57.
And there is an implication, with that, because you're creating new state departments while they're in the same ministry, but, it's not just putting somebody there. You would need what?
Staff.
To staff it?
Yeah, you need to staff it.
Okay.
And you'll need to have an office space because these are new. You'll need to get people to come and work there. You'll need to spend money, basically.
Pen and paper.
Pen and paper. And you have a new boss there. Magari, security. Even this at a time when we've talked about how our wage bill is so high.
Yeah.
We've talked about how we have to reduce costs. We've talked about how there are even directives given that, safari zimepunguzwa. Remember, we were even told at some point state officials hawatapatiana pesa kwa harambee ovyo ovyo. Of course, that's already been vunjwad. We're told there'll be no trainings, there'll be no buying of furniture.
But then we're adding that. But I want you to come back and, enumerate all of these things. Because I just wanted us to understand the implication of, adding 7 new state departments. Yeah. And there's a whole list of where we are when it comes to taming our spending. We'll get to in a minute. But, the addition of these was obviously to cater to make this broad-based government even broader. In line with that, there's some new, broader... Does it get to broadest at some point? Or where are we now?
Broadest.
We're still broad, no?
Still broad.
So we're not at broader even.
So it's
not
broad
yet.
then best.
Which is
Sam.
I think we are at the stage of working on the base.
So we're both.
Yeah.
We are getting
Yeah.
there.
First
No,
stage.
on a serious note, previously,
Okay.
the
I'm trying to keep a
minority
straight
whip,
face here. Yes.
Millie Odhiambo.
Yeah.
Remember that conversation in Bunge about who is the leader of majority, who is the
Majority.
leader of minority?
Yes, yes.
And she said, we are dissatisfied with your ruling, Mr. Speaker. And you know we're in a broad-based government, but it is broad, not based. And she repeated like 3 or 4 times, broad, not based. And I kept wondering, what exactly is she talking about? So the events after that particular day have been quite quick and significant. And you can see shortly after that, there was the AU mission. Then after that, there was the MOU signing.
Yes.
And now we have the new naming. So
now
probably when she was talking about broad but not based,
we're now
maybe
building
it's
the
getting
base.
based.
Okay, so there is a point there. So, Jay, the base, there's new people who are now broadening the base.
Indeed. I think if you look at that list keenly, then you realize that the ODM party leader, Raila Odinga, has got a number of people that have previously been associated with him or are currently hanging around him, who have been included. And remember when they were signing the MOU, one of the things they said, they'll be having constant consultations and exchange of expertise. So probably we are seeing the first phase of the implementation of the MOU, where you see the likes of Dr. Fredo Umoluga there, you see Dr. Carol Wanjiru Karugu. Yes, you see Judy Pereno, who was previously the chairperson of ODM Elections Board and an ODM nominated senator. You see the likes of Regina Wam, who's been working at as a consultant in the East African Community Health Dialogues. So a number of these appointees could actually be said to be belonging to ODM wing of government, as it were. So clearly, the base is getting broader.
It's getting broader. I mean, you take a look at some of those names like Caroline Karugu, who, sacrificed quite a bit in the 2022 election, stood with Raila Odinga, and then played a key part in his AUC bid. The mission there, and then, now coming back. There was a time there was, I think, some ambassadorial appointments. Which she, did not take up. So, finally, you start to see, quite a bit of that here. And these are names that you have. But then, beyond that, there's also, those who have been moved, those who have been in government and have now moved. Elinas, there's a name that's on top of that list, and that's been in the headlines lately and is in the headline for tomorrow's paper as well.
I guess you're talking about Professor Edward Kisiangani.
Yes.
The foremost, as you described earlier, the anti-media person to ever sit in the office of Principal Secretary in the Ministry of ICT. He was very, very actively against the media. And it was a double blow for Kisiangani today, because this is the day that the High Court also ruled on a matter about the question of advertisement, because, Kisiangani did a memo, different from Jamila's, that directing that all advertising, all broadcasting advertising should be directed to KBC, and also he selected one of the newspapers, and that's the Star, for what they call MyGov advertising. So the court today found that unconstitutional, and Justice Mugambi actually cited lack of powers. The PS had exercised powers that he did not have. So I think for the media, this is a good night. They have seen off Edward Kisiangani, perhaps earlier than he expected it. And the tragedy of this whole Kisiangani era was how convinced he was that he was right. And I mean, we should be grateful that there was a court judgment today that now comes in the middle. So it's not a media commentary, nor is it a position of
It's a court,
of Kisangani. It's a court ruling and judgment based on the assessment of the issues. And Kenyans should actually consume that judgment and see for themselves what Edward Kisangani was about. And I think even the most dangerous thing was not really about fighting the media, because media is fought all the time. I find what was more dangerous about Edward Kisangani was how he managed to mislead government. Basically, this was his third cabinet secretary, I think, third cabinet secretary, taking him down that same hole. And we hope that with time, that can be corrected, and we become a constitutional democracy as per the Constitution of Kenya 2010, not by the egoistic whims of one individual like Kisangani was at Telkom Towers.
Yeah, and that's an interesting move, because then he gets the High Court verdict, to sort of send him on his way, and that will be, I think, for him in his history, brief history at the ministry, the last thing that people will remember, that there was this court case that spoke against a directive that he put up. But then there are others who've also moved. Harry Kimtai, who's been at the Ministry of Health, and he's been a big defender of SHA that has been a huge part of the conversation. There's other people whom we would imagine are stalwarts at like the Ministry of Education, Belio Kipsang, who has moved, and quite a few others, Julius Bitok, from immigration, just after launching, the one that they told us was free. I mean, it was free before, then they added a charge, and then now they tell us it's free and we're supposed to be grateful. But that's a story for another day. But there have been quite a few other movements and a few other names that we're seeing in there, like Amos Gatecha.
Yes, Amos Gatecha has been promoted from the Principal Secretary of the Public Service to Deputy Head of the Public Service in the Executive Office of the President.
How many have we had a deputy head of public service before?
We
Never.
No.
Yeah.
I think
not
we have
before, but with this appointment, with this government, yes.
Yeah. Interesting. Sam?
But also at the same time, so the head of public service is Felix Koskei.
Yes.
And there's deputy, he's also the chief of staff.
Yes, he's also the chief of staff.
Then there's the deputy chief of staff in the name of Josephat Nanok, the former governor of Turkana. Now you have Gadesha becoming deputy head of public service. And it's also very interesting, the wording is promotion, meaning that that is a position that is higher than the PS.
It was in bold, no?
Exactly. So the question is on exactly, so what is the difference and what work are they going to be doing, all of them? Because the PS has actually been PS in the public service
that's
State
right.
Department. Now moving to that at the level to head the public service. And there's also a cabinet secretary for public service, Justin Muturi, who has been saying some interesting things lately. But there's a question you asked, alongside the movement of Harry Kimtai, who also had a lot of things to say just lately. Maybe this is likely one of his major pronouncements before leaving, and talking about the health facilities that are not complying with what is supposed to be done. And
he reminded them that their licenses will be coming up for renewal.
Exactly. But also it has not been an easy stay for this principal secretary, if you have to recall what has been happening the past few years. You may remember that once upon a time, there was another principal secretary in that department, the name of Engineer Peter Toom. And he was moved after that scandalous issue of the Global Fund, when they're supposed to be procuring treated mosquito nets. And when he was moved, then Harry Kimtai came in to take over the management of that that State Department. He has really been sort of the voice of the reforms that we've been seeing the past few months. But it should not be lost on Kenyans that this is the same ministry that has had a lot of a rough sort of working environment, the disagreements between the Principal Secretary and the Cabinet Secretary on different issues, to an extent that it was even a tug of war on who is the official source of communication from that department. And you recall that there's actually a press conference that was called sometime early February, and it had to be addressed by the Director General, Dr. Patrick Amoth, to sort of try and calm the situations that were going there. And it's not the first time they are finding a ministry that is having issues. Previously, you recall there was a problem in the Ministry of Water when Cabinet Secretary was Alice Wahome and the PS was the PS called Kiprono. And eventually, I think both of them were moved. Kiprono moved to the Agriculture Department.
And Alice Wahome
moved to the Lands Housing Department. So it appears like the President is watching how the working chemistry in these state departments, in these ministries, and perhaps this was a time to act, because now Harry Kimtai moves to the Mining Department, which is another area that has a new Cabinet Secretary not long ago. Ali Hassan Joho came on board, has been learning the ropes of the ministry. I think he's now settled. There's even some time late last year, he was hosting, what do you call it, an expo. For the mining sector in the country. And the PS then was Elijah Mwangi, who is now moving to create space for Harry Kimtai.
I think
you know the other. I just want to talk about trade. Oh, you want
Ministry of Health. Yes.
Okay.
Because it has a new PS now. State Department for Medical Services, Dr. Frederick Oluga Ouma. I think many people remember Dr. Oluga as being the Secretary General of KMPDU. He was a vocal proponent fighting for the rights of doctors.
The 100-day strike.
The 100-day strike. He was there, and then of course after that he was named Chief Officer of Health in Nairobi Metropolitan Services under the then General Mbadi. And of course, now that his star is rising, you can see, and he's been moved to a Ministry of Health. And I think for him, he's going into a ministry that, as Gitukwa said, has a lot of challenges in terms of the implementation of SHA. Remember, this SHA thing ate the minister, the original minister, who's coming back at the UN. And then now we have Dr. Deborah Barasa, who's also not having an easy time, having to fight fires all the time, having to now admit recently that there are problems with SHA. And then, of course, he's replacing Harry Kimtai, who made that pronouncement that really rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Unatisha, literally, unasema, you know, your licenses are coming up, you have to make people register, but these are private hospitals. So I think Dr. Oluga has his work cut out for him to try and make sure SHA works, if that's the way to go, or try and actually find a way of making it work, especially changing people's perception towards this health insurance fund.
And you know what's interesting with him? He's been a medical practitioner. He's practiced. He's been an activist, you know, as part of a union, and he's had, you know, a position in the Nairobi County government, and now he's on this other side of things, actually making things work. So, you know, like you say, he has his work cut out for him. Another ministry that has seen quite the changes is the Ministry of Trade. I mean, we started out with Cabinet Secretary Moses Kuria, and then we shifted to Rebecca Miano. And then after Rebecca Miano, we now have
Lee Kinyanjui,
former
Nakuru governor.
And then now we have the PS who was in the State Department for Trade, Alfred Kombudo, who's now been moved. If you speak to people in the private sector, in the manufacturing sector, they will tell you how difficult or the challenges it is with relating with this ministry. You start with one cabinet secretary who has a clear agenda to move things in a particular direction. Then you have to change that, and you come and you essentially reintroduce yourselves and begin creating a working relationship with Rebecca Miano. And then she is moved. They're now just trying to find a new relationship with Lee Kinyanjui, bring him up to speed. Okay, you keep starting from scratch. And then now you have a PS, in the State Department for Trade who's been moved, so you're getting a new PS. Who knows? And there's two PSs. Now, I'm not saying anything about the other, but, like we're saying these days, you never know with the number of changes that we've seen. But to go through 3 cabinet secretaries and now a new principal secretary at the helm. And of course, government policy largely remains the same, but let's be honest, these are titular heads of an institution. They all have a particular way of working, a particular style, personality, and they might have one or two things that they want to infuse in terms of, you know, this is the legacy that I want to leave. And it's significantly going to be different from one to the next. So you can only sympathize with this start, stop, try to work a relationship, start again. You know, you have to wonder about the relations there. And I also have to wonder about, you know, what it is like for these cabinet secretaries and now principal secretaries. The work is the same. It's you're running a ministry, you're the chief accounting officer. But it takes time to settle in, understand this is how this ministry works, this is what happens. And before long, you know, there is a move. But that said, there's people who are making a big comeback. She was in the Ministry of Health, like you said, Jamila, and then, you know, some would say she didn't take it too well because there have been several clips of her, you know, lamenting her removal from cabinet, telling us what she's doing lately. She's been a farmer and, you know, a host of other things. But now, Linus, she's here and she's back at UN Habitat. So it's the comebacks, no?
Yes, it is a comeback for Susan Nakhumicha, who we must say really tried to work hard as CS Health. And we remember hosting her here on the set of the News Gang, and she took the tough questions that were coming, not from us, but from the public at the time. And SHA remains, I think, where she left it last time. And you saw the interaction she had with the president in the funeral of the late Chebukati in Kitale, where the president poured praise on her, saying that you know, she played a role in getting the ministry where it is. And now Nakhumicha comes back to government, but as a diplomat, basically, going to the UN Habitat. But there's something as well that these comebacks say about President Ruto, and the trend seems to be setting. The president seems a bit shy to actually put people to the street, right. From cabinet to, I mean, converting Edward Kisiangani to an advisor.
The Economic Council.
Yeah, and you know, the media in its entirety will find this laughable. I mean, if he couldn't advise from the Ministry of ICT, then how close does he need to be to give quality advice? But this is the president. He doesn't really fire. He moves them around. You can see a number of them, a number of former PSs now become deputy heads of mission. Yeah. Actually presenting them with protocol problems, because I'm imagining if you are a former PS and now you're posted as a deputy head of mission in some embassy, you're actually junior to the PS of Foreign Affairs in terms of the rankings. But I think this is President Ruto's style, that, you know, these are my people, my appointees, and maybe I could save them somewhere. But of course, there have been careers, private careers, that also have suffered. The lady that was at Habitat has served for only 7 months.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, the lady who was at Habitat, just have her shows. Yeah, she's called Grace Okara, who's a seasoned economist. It's just, she was appointed 7 months ago as a UN Habitat post, and now she's being replaced by Susan Nakhumicha, who was former health minister.
And it's not clear whether she's being moved to any other...
She may be going by, you know, the president's reluctance to let people go.
Yeah, he's quite reluctant to let...
She's probably...
Yeah.
We'll be sorted.
She'll come back after some time, another 7 months, 7 months maybe. But look, there is something that informs also this kind of environment we are in. We're in this environment because of the political environment. You know, this reminds me of 2008 when there was the formation of the Grand Coalition government. There was a time President Mwai Kibaki named 40 cabinet ministers and 51 assistant ministers.
Yeah.
That is like more than a third of the National Assembly. Because sometimes
yes, that's right.
the political environment. Sorry?
No, I'm thinking of it, what you're saying, more than half of the National Assembly.
Yes. Yes, and sometimes politics goes that direction. Do we have a crisis? Yes. Does President Ruto have a political crisis to manage? Yes, he does. Remember, just the other day, he was facing a revolt from the Gen Zs. And just the other day, he had to get rid of his deputy, Rigathi Gachagua. And so in Gachagua, there is a very active opposition building up, and you know, that can potentially continue to destabilize his government. So this is a grand coalition moment for President Ruto. And I suspect these are just the first changes. Yeah. And you know what? From these changes, Raila Odinga gets about 14 appointees to the, if you look at the list, there are 14 appointees that have made it to government. This is another grand, broad-based arrangement because there is a political problem to be managed, and that political problem is two-way. First is, how do you survive between now and 2007? How do you, 2027? Yeah. How do you keep things going with Gachagua and the opposition so active on the sidelines, with Mount Kenya block seemingly gone from the president's column? That's problem number one, 2027. And then problem number two is there is a re-election bid in 2027 to take care of. And that has to be taken care of right now. Yeah. And this is why we have these lists. And I think this is a preliminary list.
Yeah, indeed. Sorry. I have to make this correction because I've been reminded by my colleagues in the newsroom, Jimmy Mbogo and Gatete Njoroge, that the Ministry of Trade has actually had 4 cabinet secretaries, not 3 as I'd stated. You see, it's tough to keep up. There was Moses Kuria, Rebecca Miano, and there was Salim Vuria.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, before he was moved to sports.
Yeah. Before he was moved to sports. Yeah. And then now Lee Kinyanjui. Yes. My word, in 2.5 years, a ministry that's as important as trade, 4 cabinet secretaries, and now 1 change, with the principal secretaries. Thanks for the correction, guys. I mean, that's clearly how, clearly this would not be a subject in grade what, 4, 5, 6? I wouldn't blame the student if you know, get it wrong.
ukieka wote wanne utasema ni nani? Yeah. Kwa choices.
But Yvonne, sorry, you were making a point.
Yes,
so
I just wanted to mention 2 things. Yeah. One, I think for all intents and purposes, the gender inclusivity in these appointments is amazing. Okay. I think for the first time we are seeing a very strategic move by the president to include more women in cabinet, if you could call it, because I think we haven't seen such a large number in appointment over a period of time. The other thing that I must also say that I've noticed is the creation of some of these state departments. If you look at the one that Judy Pareno is now going to head, basically sorts of catering for human rights, something that this government has been beaten to a pulp about. So probably if it's given to have the impact that it's supposed to, then let's watch and see what it gives. And then the last one is the creation of the one on aviation, hiving it off from the Ministry of Transport on a day that the AFDB and the Ethiopian government signed a multi-billion-dollar deal to build one of the largest airports in Africa, probably signaling that Kenya might want to look at aviation industry as one of the sectors that it want to prop up once again. So it would be important to see how these things play, but then again, who gives the instructions matters at the end of the day.
That's true. Ladies and gentlemen, I want us to take a break. We come back, but we will finish on this conversation because there's a couple of more points to be made. One about, all those changes, Jamila, and who's paying for them. And now there's been a bit of a flip-flop, with the president in terms of some very key promises that he made right after the Gen Z protest last year in June. That's June of 2024. It would seem we are going back, or let me be more precise, he's going back on his word. So I want to come back and tie that up after this break, and then we will go to Meru County to see just what is going on there. This is Newsgang. We shall be right back.